Just a quick warning that whilst Stranger Things 3 the game does contain spoilers for the show, I will be minimising the chance of any spoilers in my review by showing non-vital cutscene footage and gameplay from the first chapter or two only. It's felt like a long wait for fans, but Stranger Things is finally back on our TV screens, and the hit Netflix show has never been better, condemning the slightly lacklustre second season to the upside down where it belongs and getting back to the stuff we all love, namely Goonies style adventures, supernatural goings on and a real sense of being back in the 1980s where neon lights and synth grooves ruled. Being back in the 80s is actually a good way to lead into the review of Stranger Things the game, which arrives from developer Bonus XP on the Nintendo Switch, as playing through it has reminded me so much of playing games of a similar style when growing up back on the Commodore 64 in the mid-80s. Licensed games were all the rage and easy money, with publishing giant Ocean bringing films like Platoon, Batman and Robocop to home computers. These were simple platforming style games with a large slathering of the movie's lore placed over the top, from the authentic title screens to the music to familiar pixelated in-game characters. And that is really what Stranger Things the game is all about. Firstly, there is very little in the way of comprehensive story as you start the game. The opening scene just plays right along with the opening of Season 3 of the show, and beyond that there is very little introduction to the characters that you control. If you've never seen Stranger Things before, I think you'd be scratching your head as to what the heck is going on, and whilst the story arc followed in Season 3 is new to fans generally, the overarching story is now 3 seasons long, and there are lots of references and callbacks to previous episodes. Even just knowing the relationship between the 12 playable characters here is rarely explored. This game is really solely focused on being a beat-for-beat accompaniment to the show, so much so I'm not sure it would be a game for non-fans to actually pick up, but more on that later. Stranger Things 3, the show and the game, sees us back in the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana, which is still being plagued by creatures from the upside down, and Will, Dustin, Elle and the gang take it upon themselves to find out what's causing this new supernatural disturbance. But as they mature each season, life becomes more complex, and this latest version of the characters see them at emotional crossroads as they career towards adolescence. It's a nice wrinkle in the depth of the show as they battle their hormones and growing independence alongside the more grotesque and dangerous creatures that threaten the townsfolk. Hawkins itself is also maturing, with a brand new outlet mall causing devastation for the small family-run businesses, and its introduction to the show allows us to get out of the claustrophobic confines of the small town. This is nicely replicated in the game, with a new overworld map allowing fast travel around these outlying areas of the town as you follow along with the story missions. Gameplay is all based on co-op, and even if you haven't got a buddy alongside you on the couch, then fear not, as the AI does a fairly decent job of tagging your second party member along for the ride, intelligently attacking and defending when needed. If you do need to issue more direct commands, you can use the D-pad to order your partner to follow or hold their position, or even swap the character you control over to them. You can also freely switch in any of the new characters at any point, as long as you have them unlocked in the story. All this switching and swapping plays perfectly into the puzzle elements of this isometric adventure, where sometimes you may need to force a character to stay put on a pressure pad whilst you go off and open the door that it unlocked, or even swap in a new character to your party who has a specific special ability which may be needed, such as Lucas's rock clearing bomb special. The puzzles are fairly light, but some feel artificially bloated, forcing you to travel back and forth from a location seemingly just to pad out the time it takes to complete them, but generally there's not anything here that's going to tax the grey matter too much. Controls are simple enough, with the left stick moving your character and the face buttons performing attacks, and the D-pad, as I mentioned, controlling your partner's actions. A slightly simplified set of controls can be utilised when splitting the Joy-Cons with a buddy, which also sees the screen split horizontally, and generally this works really well. Another addition to this new version is crafting, with a ton of collectible materials available all over Hawkins by smashing up scenery, stumbling across it in the dark corners, or just straight up buying stuff from vending machines that are located around the town. Crafting can only be done at crafting stations, but they are fairly plentiful, and in addition to creating consumable items, you can also craft trinkets. These equipable items give you buffs in different scenarios, so for example one buff will allow you to deal extra damage if you're using a party consisting of 2 female characters. It's a cool system that allows you to play around with specific builds for specific enemies and really does encourage you to work through the roster of characters rather than just sticking with your favourites. One of the best elements of the game for me was the audio, specifically the music. All the official scores from the actual show are used, and it really helps to add to the fantastic atmosphere of the game as you work your way through the adventure. The music is situational too, ramping up to a more thumping variation when fighting off swarms of enemies before calming back down as you carry out some exploration. It's so well done, and its impact on the game experience cannot be underestimated. Stranger Things the game is a real love letter to fans of the show. To be able to dive into the town of Hawkins and live out season 3 so closely is a very cool idea, and it's remarkable how close to the script it sticks. They must have had the show in their hands months and months in advance, but if they have worked from existing scripts and storyboards only, then they've translated it to the screen near perfectly. The addition of the story difficulty level, which allows you to pretty much plough through the enemies and just enjoy the game, is really welcome, and I'll be turning up the difficulty for future playthroughs to give me a different and more challenging experience. When you do complete the game for the first time, you unlock Eliminator Mode, which allows you to start a new game with all 12 characters unlocked from the start. You can then switch between them at any time, but if any character dies, they are out of the game, potentially blocking access to some areas later on. Lose all characters and it's game over and you have to start again. This should give the game some nice longevity and has almost a roguelike feel to it. Co-op is also welcome, and I enjoyed my girlfriend, who is also a big fan of the show, being able to drop in and out with me as I played through the story. The game isn't without some small issues and faults though. Performance inexplicably stutters enough times to be noticeable and really shouldn't be an issue in a pixel art game like this. Loading screens are also prevalent, with pretty much every new area needing a load. Thankfully the loading is quick, but it's also just enough to begin to grate. It reminds me a little bit of Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate in its frequency. Small niggles aside, Stranger Things the game is a fun isometric co-op brawler with just enough gameplay mechanics sprinkled on top to keep it interesting. Fans of the show should absolutely lap this up, which is who it's aimed at really. I'm going to award Stranger Things 3 the game on the Nintendo Switch an upside down 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching the review guys. Please consider subscribing below if you're new here. Hit that like button and leave me a comment. Are you a fan of the show, or is this game going to be completely fresh to you? If you have any questions, let me know below and I'll be happy to help out. Okay, thanks again for watching and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers guys, bye bye.